Okay, now that we have our basic city set up, as well as a rough concept for what kind of look we want to aim for, let's start focusing on the scattering and placement of more details on the base buildings that we now have. This will be a combination of all of the tools and techniques that I've already shown you, including just normal scattering, as well as using particle paint, clone stamp, property paint, whatever mix of techniques works for every scenario. And I just want to show you the versatility that you get with Clarice between utilizing automatic tools for achieving great layouts, as well as for using your own techniques, as well as more manual ways of handling things in order to achieve the result. And the best way to do everything is to have a blend of these two different techniques, right? Automatic and manual. So let's first begin by importing some geo, and let me just create a new context. I will call this vegetation. No, I'll call it trees, and enter this and file, import geometry. Let's go to our project folder and plants tree. Let's select all of these and click open. And yes, we'd like to import the OBJ materials. Let's go back to our geometry and let's create a new context called shanties. And let's go in. And here let's go to import geometry. And let's go into our project. And let's select all of our shanty geo and click open. And we have no materials for these, so no. And again, let's create a new folder, context, called balconies. And let's go in and let's import our balcony geometry. Select all, open, no. Okay. So that is all the geometry we'll need for now. Just a few different types of objects, trees, balconies, shanties, just to have like a little bit of variety. Of course, for your own projects you can have a lot more. The logic more for the way I'm going to scatter here is that I will first scatter things automatically on my background geometry. So let me pull up my close background bottom city. And I went into my background folder and I split these apart into separate contexts just to keep things slightly more organized. I recommend that everyone takes some time to do this every once in a while, just so you don't get lost when your project balloons and becomes very big. It can be very difficult to keep things efficient and easy to navigate. So this takes very little time and really helps in the long run. So first of all, we're going to do some automatic scattering in the background. Less detail is needed there, so we can be less careful. And then in the foreground, we will approach it differently with our particle paint tools and property paint tools, just to have a more manual approach. So let's first only view our background city context by selecting context on top. And I'll only scatter things on the close background city as well as some on top. The mid and far background city parts are frankly too far away for me to even bother scattering, because none of that detail will be visible, and I want to save some memory, even though Clarice is great at handling billions of polygons, just so that my project doesn't become too slow. So first of all, let's scatter some trees on the background city. So what we're going to do is go in here, and let's zoom in a little bit. And we're going to create a new geometry point cloud. And in here, we'll select geometry to be close BG bottom city, apply. And point count, let's do 10,000. So this can take a few seconds to update, especially if you're working on a computer that is not so super fast like mine. So you sometimes have to wait a little bit. Okay, So first of all, however, I will mention that I'm going to create a material network for this scattering of this point cloud, and it's better to first work with it as an actual material so that you're not instantly applying your network here to the point cloud. Maybe you will have it based on normals or distance to UV, things like that, because the point cloud, as you have just seen, takes a little bit of time to be calculated. So first of all, we want to work on that without the point cloud. So let's just create a new material mat, and let's just make this bigger. Switch this, and let's split that. I'm a little bit low on space, but what can you do? Let's see now here. Here, let's select image view, and in our image, I will just create a new layer, and let's disable these previous ones, and let's just call this network underscore test. And in here, let's just go back here, plus background city. In here, we're going to select geometries and just select close BG bottom city. Apply. So we're only seeing this in the render, this part of the city that we're currently working on. And let's override the material with our new mat. So let's just call this test underscore mat. Okay, perfect. So let's just see a little bit. And let's go back here. In our test material, what do I want to do? How do I want to scatter these trees? Well, first of all, I want to only scatter them on surfaces facing up. So I will be looking for the normals that are facing in Y. And then I think I will combine that with a fractal noise, so we get pockets of trees in some places, but not others. As you would in a real city, there will be some areas with more vegetation, some areas with less, just to give it a little bit more variety. So let's create a normal map, texture normal map, okay, as well as reorder, which is, remember, like a shuffle node from Nuke. And let's connect that to input. In here, let's change all channels to be G instead of being RGBA. So everything is the green channel, which is the normals facing up. Because as I said before, RGB, X, Y, Z correspond, the Y and the G correspond to each other. So let's apply this here. And now you see we have all of our up facing normals painted in white and everything else in black. So we only want the trees growing on things that are facing up. Furthermore, let's create a fractal noise. And let's just disconnect this first so we can work on this separately. And in the fractal noise, we want this to be projected not on UVs, but maybe cubic, and object to be world. So this will apply to the world instead of each object separately. So let us scroll down and play around with these settings. Let's increase the UV scale. Let's make this bigger. Cool. So let's make that smaller, just so we can see what we're doing better. Let's zoom in here. And let's increase the contrast some more. Maybe a lot more. 80%. And let's have a play around with some of these settings. Maybe 1.5 here. And here, maybe let's change this to a bit more, 12. maybe, let's see here, 15 maybe. So I want patches that will have a lot of vegetation and the rest won't have any. So okay, so this seems pretty good. A little bit more reasonable. So we have some buildings where the people on top will have grown a lot of trees and some will not have. I think that's quite realistic in terms of what cities look like. So it's better than having a full equal distribution on your whole city. So now let's take this in the network and let's create a blend node. And let's connect both of these into the blend node. And so what we want, currently this is adding them together. So let's see, multiply. Not quite. Alpha replace. Yep, that's more like it. So now we have a combination of these two types of masking. And so where we'll have only the upwards facing panels, and then also only the panels where the noise is white, and combined we get a little bit more of a natural result. Here we could try something a little bit different actually. Let's change that slightly. Yeah, okay. So now we want to take this setup that we have, and if we just drag and drop our point cloud in here, and let's enable that again. Oops, okay. So let's just take this and connect it to our sampling texture. And this will take a little time to calculate. This is why I didn't want to have this connected to the point cloud while we were working, because each time we make a change, this would take some time to recalculate and rescatter all the points. It's just quicker to kind of first work out exactly how your decimation or sampling map will look on just material and then apply it to a point cloud. Okay, so now that's done. And we have our points, which are scattered on the upwards facing faces. And let's take all of these nodes that we've just created in the network, and let's just right click and contextualize them, and we're going to call this tree point cloud network, and they'll still be connected to our point cloud, but now we have them organized. It's slightly more tidy. So now let's create a new scatter, and we're going to call this tree underscore sc, and we'll call this tree pc for point cloud and scatter respectively. And here, geometry support, we'll just select our tree pc and add our trees here. Apply. Okay. Okay. And now we have our trees only scattered on the tops of buildings. And by the way, here's a little trick, just to show you. Whenever you have an object, you can scroll down here and change the display color. So here I've changed it to dark green. It's quite nice to work this way because you can make it a little bit easier for yourself to recognize what certain objects are, just to kind of make it easier to not get lost in your scene. So I made the trees green. So I think we can actually increase the number of these to maybe, let's do 30,000. Nice. And now I'll want to scatter some shanties as well, shanty houses. So at this distance, I don't want to be scattering any balconies because I feel like it's a little bit of a waste of time and memory. I think for those kind of little details, if we need them, we can just matte paint them later on. So for my shanties, I also want them on the tops of these buildings, but I want them to appear where the trees are not. So let's just make a copy of our tree point cloud network, and we'll call this shanty point cloud network. Okay. And in our test material, we will instead connect our shanty point cloud network, where the blend was the last node. All I want to do here, I believe, is create oops, I actually connected this. Yeah. Okay. Here I want to create an invert node, so texture invert, and I want to invert the fractal noise. So this part will not be affected. It'll still only select the tops of buildings, but it should select the other parts of the rooftops. So actually this, now that I've inverted it, is you can see that the values aren't perfect. There's a lot of grays, so let's just create a remap, texture remap, and this is like a curves from Photoshop, so let's just make this slightly sharper. And so now we're selecting the parts of the rooftops even sharper, maybe, where the trees are not appearing. So let's go back in and create a new scatterer, and we'll call this shanty SC, and new geometry point cloud shanty PC, and here for the geometry we'll select our close background bottom city again, and for the sampling texture we'll select the blend here. And actually here's a little trick that I use, because it can become a little bit confusing when here you're connecting into your sampling texture this blend, because you can easily forget where this network ends and what this node is and what it does and what it means and what node you should select to plug in there. So what I usually do is, and let's go into here, I create a dummy node. So let's just say, what is something that is noticeable? If I go to hue, maybe. Okay. This is quite a noticeable color. So I'll just connect it in here. But I'm not going to do anything. I'll just rename this shanty point cloud network out. And now, in my shanty point cloud, here the sampling texture is named very clearly. If I go in, let me throw it in there. If I go into this folder, I instantly know what the end node is of this network. So it's just a cleaner way of working, right? And we can of course do the same for the trees, but we have to go into the tree point cloud network, and actually I'll just copy this, paste it here, call it tree point cloud network, and just throw it in here. And I don't want this to be connected to the other setup, which it automatically is when you copy, so let's just plug it in here. The danger is, of course, that now we have to recalculate because it has detected a change in the network. Anyway, so now that we have our shanty point cloud here, let's first go into our shanty scatterer, and let's connect the shanty point cloud to the geometry support and add our geometries. And now in the shanty point cloud, let's create, I don't know, 5,000? 10,000 maybe. Okay. Click enter and let it calculate. Okay, cool. We have these, but they are far too big. Let's just lock our view on this folder. Let's just go into the shanties and let's select all of them. And let's, if you middle mouse click on any of these arrows and drag, you can rescale in all of the axes at once. So we want these maybe at point 2. Let's just have a look. Maybe a little bit bigger actually. Let's do 0.3. Okay. That looks more reasonable. Okay. So now we have this part of the city and we have scattered our trees as well as our shanties. So the lesson here is that it is much better, and this part of the city as well, is that it's much better to work modularly. So first we create our scattering setups for this part. Then if we want, we'll go to our top city or separate bottom city, foreground towers, and do the scattering setups for those geometries separately, because there is going to be much more detail needed for the foreground elements than for the background elements. So you want to pay reasonable amount of attention to all of the parts of the city. So for the background, we can worry less, and for the foreground, we should worry more. So let's just create these all separately. And I'm going to skip some of the process because it takes hours and hours, but basically we will repeat this stage for anything far away. So feel free to do so for your different parts of the city in the background, similarly to this. However, there will be one more thing that I should show you first in the automatic scattering section. And for that, let's go to our screen right foreground tower. Okay, so this tower, even though it's in the foreground, I was able to get away with just automatic scattering. However, there's a trick that I'd like to show you just to save on memory again, because these projects do get very huge, and any shortcut that you can take so that you don't have to scatter extra points is worth taking. So let's just go back into our previous folder, and let's just grab our test map material, and let's just throw it into our screen right foreground tower folder. And in our image here, we want to be viewing this geometry. Apply. Okay, so now we have this. So let's go back, and here let's just disconnect by unclicking. So what we want to do is we want to scatter points on this. Let's just do that really quickly. Let's create a point cloud. Geometry. Let's select our screen right tower. And let's give it a little bit of time. Okay. So now we've scattered points on this. However, in our camera view, we only see about maybe this much of this building, right? So we only need points in this area. We don't need all of these here. We don't need them on the other side. So how can we prevent that, we can... Okay, here's a few ways. I'll show you a rough one, but hopefully it'll get you thinking in the right direction. So what we can do is we can create a new scope. And here in our test mat, let's just make this a little bit bigger. Let's create a new texture scope. And in the texture scope, add our geometry scope that we've just created. And let's apply this to color. And let's just go find our geometry scope. There it is. So let's scale it up. Okay, and now if we move it down to intersect with our geometry. Now what this is doing is it's making the area where the cube and the scope connect white and everything else black. So what we want is to make this just big enough to cover the area that we can see through our camera. And yeah, that's reasonably good enough. And so now we will want our point clouds to only be appearing within this area. So currently it is everywhere, but if I just connect this to the sampling texture of the point cloud, and in the sampling texture, or sorry, in the point cloud, you have to scroll down and change the geometry mode to global base. And again, give this a few seconds to recalculate. Okay, and now you can see all of the points that I'm creating are just appearing in the area where I want them. So this is a good way to save a little bit of memory, because previously, in order to get the same density of points, we might have had to scatter maybe 5 times as many points, because we were getting coverage on the whole object, whereas now we're isolating it to just that area, so we can get away with less points. So we can lower this to at least to 500 points, and it's just a more economical way of working, right? So that's something that I recommend doing whenever you have the opportunity. It's not always feasible, but it's quite worth it. And yeah, so then we'll go ahead and scatter things on this tower the same way that we did previously, and we'll keep doing this until we hit a point where we need to scatter things manually. So let's just skip to that part in the next video.